This isn't the sort of vehicle that you would normally see on Autocar India, but there's a reason we're riding an ATV today. In fact, there are three reasons. The first is that this is in all likelihood the world's fastest electric ATV at the moment. The second, it's manufactured in India right here in Goa. And the third is that it can be registered for road legal use in India, but there's a catch which I will get back to in a bit. Now, as you can see, I am full of sand, I am drenched, and I'm very happy because this thing is a lot of fun. But before we go into what it is, let's give you a bit of a background story on who Powerland is and why they decided to make the Tachyon electric ATV. This is a company that's been around for about 10 years now, and they launched a diesel ATV in India in about 2017, which sold for a couple of years. But by the time 2019 arrived, they decided that they needed to look to the future because emission norms were looming, things were looking really difficult for a diesel ATV. Furthermore, that diesel ATV was basically just an imported kit that was being assembled and sold in India, not really a local product. The Tachyon that you see here is the company's first in-house creation, and Powerland knew that they had to do something radical to stand out. So they decided to make the world's fastest electric ATV. Surprisingly enough, even though it's already close to the end of 2024, there are still very few electric ATVs that are actually on sale worldwide, and the Tachyon does seem to be the quickest of them all. Powerland has achieved this by creating a brand new platform with a powerful electric motor driving each of the four wheels. So with 4 electric motors, the total output is a very high 50 horsepower, but the really high number is 800 Newton meters of torque. Now EVs have these crazy torque numbers, and this one is particularly crazy. The effect of that is that this is a really surprisingly fast thing to ride. It has a top speed of 90 kph, which does not sound that fast, but believe me, in rough terrain, that is a very high speed, especially with the way this thing behaves. But before I tell you how it rides, let me tell you how to ride it. The controls are fairly straightforward, but it is really quite different to a motorcycle, especially in the way it rides with 4 wheels. It's a completely different thing. Let me show you how you control this. Your starter switch is down here, so you've got a 3-stage kill switch, one to prime the electrics and one to actually turn it on. You have a rotary control here for reverse, neutral and drive, very straightforward. Like with an electric scooter, you just press the brake and select the mode that you want. Then, like every other ATV or a jet ski, you don't have a twist grip like a motorcycle, but you have this push paddle out here for the accelerator. The idea behind this is that if you lose control, you will never be in a situation where you will accidentally increase the acceleration, your hand will come off and you will completely deactivate the acceleration. Brakes wise, there are 2 braking inputs. You have a left hand brake like on a scooter, and you have a foot brake down there like on a very old scooter. Now Powerland has taken an interesting approach with the brakes. If you use the hand lever, it's a combined brake. If you use a foot lever, it's a combined brake. The hand lever is quite a bit more powerful than the foot lever, and if you use the hand lever, it will disengage the accelerator input. That's like we see on some low speed electric vehicles. Now on scooters, that's really irritating, but on the ATV, it's really quite a nice safety feature. If you want to add some braking input while accelerating off-road, you can do that with the foot brake. Beyond that, the inputs are fairly straightforward. You also have a switch out here which lets you move between eco mode and boost mode, and 2-wheel drive or 4-wheel drive. For this sort of terrain, I was in boost mode the whole time and all-wheel drive the whole time. With the 4-wheel drive system, the front motors give you about 60% of the power and the rear motors give you 90% of the power. 2-wheel drive is not really that quick. If you want that excitement, you've got to have it in 4-wheel drive. And very interestingly, with an electric setup, the company tells us it's actually more efficient when you leave it in all-wheel drive. You'll get better range that way. That's the future with EVs. They're really quite different with combustion engines. All-wheel drive cars are less fuel efficient than rear-wheel drive or front-wheel drive. But apparently here, it's the other way around. Speaking of efficiency, you have an 11 kilowatt-hour battery that's situated right down there, keeps the mass really low. In fact, the company tells us that with its heavy motors at each wheel, with that heavy battery pack down low, the center of mass on this ATV is really low. The ground clearance is about 260 odd mm, and the center of gravity is just about 50 mm higher than that. So that is really low for an ATV. ATVs are known for being slightly tricky and dangerous things. You can roll them if you're not careful. But with this one, the company says its tendency to roll over is far less than a traditional combustion ATV. So what is this thing like to ride? Well, it's really quite unique. First of all, it is dead silent, and that has so many advantages if you're trying to use it in an agricultural space or in a forest space where you don't want to disturb people. ATVs can be really noisy things. This is beautifully quiet. Second of all, the actual throttle calibration is really nice. When you're setting off, it's very smooth. Up to about 30-40% of travel, it is smooth. There's no jerkiness and you get a decent sense of control. But if you push it further, man, this thing is fast if you keep it in all-wheel drive mode. It doesn't launch off the line really hard, but once you build a bit of momentum, you really have to hang on. And the interesting thing here is that there's a lot of torque at the front wheels. So what happens is you hit a bump, one of the wheels comes off the ground, it lands, it grabs, it spins up, it pulls the bar to one direction. It's a really visceral, violent thing. You've got to keep a firm grip on the bar. This is not like a motorcycle where you keep a light grip and let the front end do its thing. You want to be in control here. I think they could tone down the torque response at the front. It is really quite aggressive, especially the way it grabs and moves around. Torque steer, essentially. It pulls you in one direction, you've got to bring it back on track. Now, for an experienced rider, someone who isn't startled by these things, it's good fun. But if you put a newbie on this thing, four-wheel drive boost mode, they need to be careful. So maybe they could tone down the torque response at higher speeds, or maybe they could just give it a steering stabilizer, which is something the company says it is looking into. But speed, really quick. I don't think I went above 60 kph today and it felt really fast. The company says the top speed is 90. The company tells us that it is looking at developing a power steering system as well as a steering damper. Both of those will reduce the aggression and help the chassis to deal with rough terrain in a calmer fashion. Speaking of the chassis, the company manufactures this in its facility where it also assembles the battery packs. Certain components like the body panels, brakes and multiple electricals are imported, but the Tachyon also has some localized parts. The suspension and the tires are actually both localized components. The suspension itself is really quite good. It's not exactly magic ride plush. You do feel the movement of the terrain because the wheel track is quite short, the wheelbase is quite short. It's not like one of those side-by-side ATVs that just completely iron out the terrain. You are more connected to the terrain, but this thing really takes you anywhere. All-terrain vehicle. Today, I really got a taste of that. You come, look around, see where you want to go. I want to go that way. Let's see if it can go there. And it invariably takes you there. It's really quite amazing. Tires also very nice. These are by a company called BKT. They're very big into the off-road space internationally. The fascinating thing about these tires is that they run on just 6 psi. That is the rated pressure. It doesn't feel like it's on a flat at all. It's a really strong tire. I have really enjoyed riding this thing today. It's absolutely unique. It is really very quick and exciting, and it's very capable as well. This is the very definition of a recreational vehicle, and that brings us nicely onto the fact of how you can register this for road use. Now, Powerland has managed to homologate it as a tractor and as a quadricycle, and it can be sold as both those things overseas. In India, if you want to use this on the road, you can only use it as an electric tractor, and that regulation restricts the top speed to 40 kph. Now, if you want the full performance, Powerland will sell it to you in this spec as well, but there are a couple of things to consider. The first is that it cannot be road legal, and the second is that you'll be paying quite a bit more. That's because the government of India will tax you more money if you decide to have fun. Buy it as a tractor, you will pay 12% GST. Buy it like this, 28% GST. So, how much is all this going to cost you? Well, it's not very cheap. 9.5 lakh rupees is the price, which is a little more affordable than the equivalent petrol-powered ATV from Polaris, but it's still a lot of money. Powerland is aware of this, and that's why they're targeting overseas business primarily. So far, they've sold about 150 units. They're just starting off, but of that, 85% has gone overseas. In the long run, the company is targeting markets like North America, South America, Europe, the Middle East, basically markets where leisure and fun are taken seriously. At the moment, Powerland is a really small startup with relatively simple infrastructure, but they're a very enthusiastic group of people who have made a really fun machine. They have significant plans for expansion, and from what I've seen so far, I think they're on their way to much bigger things.